What's up? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Phil, and that's Sam.
Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're having a great day.
We're doing Why China is Terrified of US's new Manta Ray Submarine. We're going to the U.S. Navy on this one. We've done military-based content on the channel before, and we've learned a ton.
Yeah.
But this time...
We've seen some pretty cool gadgets.
Yeah, but this time is the first time we're going underwater with a new gadget. And I think this is going to be an unmanned submarine.
Which
so
is really crazy.
it's probably why China's a little terrified about it.
Would
as
be
I
too.
said, we've done the SR-72. We've done, looked into laser warfare. We've gone back and done Medal of Honors type stuff. So
Yeah, we've even learned about some like crazy guns that they created.
yeah. So if you're interested in that kind of content, number one, drop us another suggestion down below. And we'd love to have you as a part of our channel. So hit that subscribe button. And if you want to hit that like button, it really does help our channel quite a bit. So let's get into why China might be so terrified of this new technology.
It's so quiet that even regular marine life mistakes it as just one of its own.
Wow.
Yet the American-built underwater drone is large enough to deter any curious would-be predator, which all give it a wide berth. This unique vehicle is about the size of a small commercial fishing vessel, but when seen from above it looks like a giant manta ray cruising the world's oceans. It has no propellers, and the only visible oddity that marks the underwater vehicle as artificial to a casual observer is the large fin that sticks up in the back, like an aircraft tail. It's a predator unlike anything else in the ocean. The same silencing technology that makes American submarines legendarily quiet has gone into its construction. Though it's designed to be expendable, this makes it perfect for penetrating deep into dangerous enemy waters and carrying out the most dangerous of missions. This artificial fish is currently on the hunt for prey. The vehicle features both passive and active sonar, but it's currently cruising along at several knots using only its passive sonar and a host of highly classified sensors, all tuned into catching one of the biggest fish in the ocean, a Chinese attack submarine. And when it finds one, this predator has teeth with which to strike. Up above the waves, the
big
U.S.
fish.
manned fleet is stretched thin, trying to cover millions of square miles of ocean to keep the Chinese submarines away from shipping routes or even friendly ports back home. Only being able to bring a portion of its total navy to the fight in the Pacific, the United States has been working on a backup plan for years, the Ghost Fleet. The fleet of unmanned vehicles numbers over 100 semi- or completely autonomous vessels, from surface combatants to mobile missile batteries, capable of backing up everything from manned warships to underwater hunters tasked with locating, tracking, and sometimes even destroying Chinese vessels, both above and below the surface. The artificial intelligence-powered artificial manta ray runs all of its sensory data against a library of known signatures from Chinese vessels, until finally there's a match. The big underwater drone banks silently and accelerates toward its target, yet even at top speed it barely emits a whisper as it glides through the water. Nature has spent hundreds of millions of years achieving aquatic perfection, and the Americans are apt in their studies, emulating the natural movement and the design of manta rays for this sub-hunting drone.
That's
The
pretty
Chinese
cool.
submarine is busy listening for potential prey or predators with a delicate suite of electronic warfare equipment, specifically designed to sniff out enemy drones. However, the artificial manta ray gives off almost no electronic emissions. Onboard AI handles all the decisions a human operator would normally make. The vehicle is designed to engage known threats automatically, but only if it has a confidence rate of above 98%. If it's in any way in doubt about its target, the big drone will instead silently rise to the surface and extend a satellite antenna to send a microburst transmission to an orbiting satellite, relaying its location and the location of the tracked hostile. From there, a human operator will make the decision on what to do next. The drone can either follow the hostile or directly engage it. This time, though, the AI is 100% confident about its target. The Chinese submarine has unique acoustic signatures, and the drone is now in proximity to detect it with enough fidelity that it can even identify the exact submarine it's currently hunting.
It's
This is
interesting
crazy.
because I've been personally using AI so much more recently. I know you have as well, Sam. And it does tend to make a lot of mistakes. Obviously, we're not using the scale that the U.S.
No.
military is using, and I'm sure AI has been around a lot longer than we know. So the version that they have is probably much better trained. But, that said, it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary in a way to think about the fact that the AI can decide, maybe it decides, yeah, I'm 100% correct. That's what it is, but it's not. And then, just a simple decision by this AI can potentially trigger World War III or whatever, right? Because from what I understand, like it was alluding to taking out Chinese ships here. I don't think that's happened, right? Like I don't think that's ever happened in the real world. I don't remember ever reading or hearing about a conflict that arose from the US and China, which led to a military conflict, because sometimes that's all it takes is one ship and another one, and then all of a sudden it blows out of proportion, right? So I just found that interesting, getting into AI
Yeah,
more
I thought the
recently.
same thing. I was like, even 80, I was like 98%. First of all, to me, even 2% error, leaving that is still a lot. And from, like you said, our experience, like I was like, their 98 makes me feel like it'd be like 78 for sure, or sure of it.
Yeah.
Another thing that I thought was really cool is just how they use real marine life and the study of what they've looked at in real manta rays
Yeah.
to
the design.
recreate. Yeah, like, that's really cool.
Yeah, agreed.
With enough fidelity that can even identify the exact submarine it's currently hunting. The AI selects a torpedo from its belly-mounted weapons bay, and a few seconds later, the weapon is silently released into the water. A second after that, the torpedo's battery brings its propulsion to life, and the deadly fish is en route to its target. There's no need to hide anymore, and both the drone and the torpedo turn on their active sonar. The Chinese boat is immediately alerted and then terrified to discover just how close the American drone is. The confirmation of a torpedo in the water sends a chill down the captain's spine. There is little hope of evading such a close-range shot, but the submarine immediately ejects countermeasures. Noisemakers are ejected from the openings along the hull into the water, creating an extremely attractive sonar signature for both the drone and the torpedo. The torpedo is lured towards a noisemaker by the juicy sonar return, but the drone's artificial intelligence has identified the sudden spike in noise as countermeasures. It's still linked to the torpedo with a long enough fiber optic cable that spools out behind the torpedo as it travels through the water, and it relays commands to the torpedo to correct its course and ignore the countermeasures.
That's
The
crazy.
Chinese captain's face goes pale. There's nothing he can do now but order the boat to perform an emergency surfacing. Hopefully, they'll be near enough the surface when the torpedo strikes that most of the crew can escape the doomed submarine. The proceeding is a potential scenario where America's new sub-hunting drone could be used in case of a war in the Pacific against China. While many nations are pursuing drone programs for land, sea, subsea, and air applications, the United States has identified a need for a massive expansion of naval drones as a priority to ensure stability in the South Pacific. This comes as a result of China's increasingly hostile foreign policy in the South China Sea and in neighboring waters, with the nation bullying its neighbors for access to rich energy and fish resources that fall outside of China's own territorial waters. The situation is so tense that even Vietnam has thrown its lot in with the US in an attempt to fend off China's aggression on the high seas. Earlier this year, the Chinese Navy wounded several Filipino sailors as they attempted to resupply Filipino troops stationed on a shoal inside the Philippines' own territorial waters that are claimed by China. The move has prompted many to wonder where the red line is that'll lead to open conflict. And it's not just its weaker regional neighbors that China is picking on. Last year, a Chinese destroyer pulled up alongside an Australian military vessel whose prop had been fouled by discarded fishing nets. The Australian captain alerted the Chinese ship that he had divers in the water, as is normal procedure. Rather than offer assistance as any other nation navy would do, the Chinese captain instead ordered his ship's sonar to be briefly run at full power, injuring the Australian divers. Add in ever-mounting tensions with Taiwan and a conflict with China seems all but certain. But if the US is to face off against China, it needs to make up for its lack of numbers. Currently, the Chinese Navy outnumbers the Americans, but most Chinese ships are not suited for open water operations. Despite their superior numbers, US ships are still better equipped and bring more missiles to the fight. But China is slowly closing that gap. To make matters worse, the US Navy has global commitments it just cannot abandon, and thus it can only bring a portion of its full strength into a fight with China. This is where the Ghost Fleet and DARPA's new Manta Ray drone come into play. The US is looking to add approximately 100 large unmanned platforms to its naval inventory by 2030, following a similar push by the US Army and Marines, which are looking to acquire thousands of drones within the next 2 years. The Air Force was already planning to integrate drones in its future air fleets, with the collaborative combat aircraft concept being in development for years now. alongside the next-generation air dominance fighter. This 6th-generation fighter will act as a mothership for a small fleet of expendable drones, which can then perform more dangerous tasks that the manned fighter would be at too great a risk for. The Navy's approach to drone warfare mirrors the Air Force's in that it's acquiring larger drones equipped with advanced artificial intelligence that will allow them to act either semi-autonomously or fully autonomously. This Ghost fleet will supplement the manned fleet, leveling the playing field against superior Chinese numbers and allowing the Navy to send drones into waters too dangerous for manned ships.
It's so wild when you think about the fact that warfare in the future is likely going to be conducted by a bunch of robots fighting each other and not by soldiers any longer.
Well, one thing that's kind of weird to me is that I would have thought that their first step would have been having these machines that are obviously going in without a person in them, but ultimately a person at home, like behind the computer, would be the one pulling the trigger at the end of it, right? Like it almost seems like we're skipping that step. It almost
No, that's already been in play where they've had that, where it's somebody's controlling like a missile drop via an unmanned aircraft. And so they're still targeting from like a base, and they're the ones, clicking fire and all that kind of stuff. But
I'm just talking about more so like these submarines, and they're talking about like basically self-driving jets, like planes, like fighter planes to go out there, right? So something like that, like I don't think something like that exists where like it's by itself, but a human is ultimately behind it, like consulting with it to let it know if they wanted to like shoot somebody or drop a bomb or let off one of the torpedoes or whatever, right?
So you're saying like from just like the Navy side of things, or you're saying in general for like aircraft and land vehicles and stuff like that too? What's your question?
I'm just saying that, like, I mean, I obviously don't know a lot about this. So I'm just asking, like, they're right now, like, they're saying that they're creating all of these completely autonomous machines, right? So I'm saying, like, right now, does something exist where they already have something like that, but a human is not controlling it? It's still AI and it's still doing what it's supposed to do, but at the end, the human is still making the ultimate decision.
Well, I guess it depends on what your definition of AI would be, because I think that there is like the flight path, like even autopilot is generally AI, right?
Yeah.
So I think, like to some degree, maybe not the degree that you're thinking of, that it's like the one that's identifying all the targets and, doing all the groundwork until like you just communicate back and say, can I shoot this thing or whatever? Maybe not to that degree. I don't know. I'm not, an expert, and you guys might have more insights on that. So drop them down below. But I was just going to say that, like I said, it's crazy to me to think that, all the wars that have been fought previously have been through soldiers and, manned vehicles and everything, and how many lives have been lost because of that. So that would be one, obviously, major positive, is that maybe it would result in less people dying through war. And I guess a negative of that also could be, the consequence of dying in war kind of deters people from taking part in it, right? So, the fact that you may come to this point where you're not going to lose as much human life, it's going to be more, robotic life, if you want to call it that, that's going to be lost, may incentivize people to try to become more aggressive.
Yeah, and have
right?
more conflict more often.
Yeah, and not be so reserved about that idea. Anyways, let's continue.
And allowing the Navy to send drones into waters too dangerous for manned ships. One key area in which naval drones will excel is where American Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has been focusing many of its efforts: anti-submarine warfare. With threats of the Soviet Union submarines breaking out into the Atlantic and destroying U.S. reinforcements on their way to Europe, the U.S. placed major emphasis on anti-submarine warfare, or ASW, during the Cold War, becoming an expert in identifying, tracking, and hunting down these elusive assets. However, after the fall of the Soviet Union and with no major competitors on the horizon, the U.S.'s ASW capabilities atrophied to embarrassing levels, prompting the U.S. to borrow a Swedish submarine and its crew for an extended training regimen meant to restore the Navy's ASW proficiency. But the ocean is vast, and ASW can be very tedious. This is where DARPA's Manta Ray comes into play. The stealthy drone is designed to sniff out enemy submarines, though it's capable of tracking and identifying other threats as well. The path to the creation of the Manta Ray began back in 2020, when DARPA awarded contracts to Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and Navitech to begin development on a new type of drone. DARPA gave the defense contractors a description of what it wanted: an autonomous underwater vehicle able to operate on its own, harvest its own energy, and complete a variety of missions autonomously. A year later, Lockheed Martin dropped out of the race, and DARPA awarded Northrop Grumman and Navitech contracts to develop a full-scale technology demonstrator. In September 2023, Navitech, now known as PACMAR Technologies, began testing a smaller-scale prototype in open water to verify the effectiveness of its sensor suite and its ability to carry out autonomous tasks without human guidance. Northrop Grumman, however, seems to have beaten PACMAR to the punch, unveiling a full-scale technology demonstrator ready for open water trials. Dubbed the Manta Ray, the drone utilizes a sea glider shape that makes it look like a stealth bomber. The drone's been touted as being highly modular, which means it's easy to ship to wherever it's needed and easy to assemble once on location. This is important to the Navy, as it allows it to use transport aircraft to bring the drone wherever it's needed quickly and saves valuable pier space that other ships need. Ease in assembly also means that specialized technicians don't need to be present in theater wherever the drone is deployed, a key benefit given the vast size of the Pacific Ocean, where it's expected to serve the most. The Manta Ray features something truly extraordinary for any drone. A key requirement from the Navy was full autonomy for the drone. The Navy didn't want a drone that was just going to add more workload for its sailors, or require additional personnel to be recruited and trained in its operation. This is where artificial intelligence comes into play, allowing the drone to work alongside but independently of other vessels. But that's not all the autonomy that the Navy wanted, because the drone has to be completely self-sufficient as well. It is the ultimate fire-and-forget weapon, with the Manta Ray featuring the ability to actually generate its own electricity and thus removing it from complicated logistics chains. This is a massive win for the Navy, especially as otherwise it would face the prospect of having to set up refueling capabilities for drones that could be wandering the entire length and breadth of the Pacific Ocean and beyond. This is hard enough in peacetime, let alone under the stresses of wartime conditions. DARPA placed a premium on energy management when putting out design proposals for the Manta Ray. A requirement for extreme duration and independence means that a premium was placed on how the drone uses its onboard energy reserves, prompting the use of new techniques to minimize energy draw while operational. The effort has even led to the inclusion of Metron Incorporated, specifically to work on the drone's energy systems. The effort has been focused on finding ways of making the same amount of energy go even further than ever before, and this means a premium on conserving energy in the first place. The drone's unique Manta Ray shape helps it achieve this reduction in energy draw with its ability to slip through the water in the same manner as its namesake fish, using a fraction of the power current drones use. But the drone also needs to generate its own electricity, and this might be the most novel piece of tech on board. Currently, underwater drones are either directly tethered to a surface ship from where they draw power, or they need to be chased by a support ship that can provide refueling as necessary. With the most long-duration drones currently having an operational range of only a few days, this is logistically challenging, especially if the Manta Ray and its many siblings are meant to travel far and wide in pursuit of hostile submarines. To make matters worse, today's underwater drones have massive power draws, mostly just from their propulsion systems, before taking into account things like sensors or payloads. This limits their endurance even more and places a greater logistical burden on the Navy. The Air Force doesn't have this problem thanks to its drone's ability to range widely or use extremely efficient means of propulsion and atmospheric winds to stay aloft for days at a time. The Navy is thus looking to replicate and then surpass the success of airborne drones by engineering them to draw energy directly out of the ocean itself. Currently, details on the Manta Ray remain extremely classified, but one of the suspected methods of generating electricity underwater without human assistance is the use of ocean currents themselves. The drone is envisioned dropping down to the bottom of the sea and then anchoring itself in place. It can then deploy a pinwheel-like device on a tether, catching the energy of ocean currents and converting it into an electrical charge.
That's
A
crazy.
similar method is already used in generating power around the world, known as wave energy conversion, so the concept is proven to work at large scale. The question is, can it work underwater and on a much smaller scale? Another possibility of producing energy is known as salinity gradient power. The power can be accessed via reversed electrodialysis, or RED. Red utilizes a stack of alternating cathode and anode exchanging perm-selective membranes that are alternatively filled with fresh water and seawater. The difference in salinity between the membranes generates electricity which can be captured and stored by the drone. Yet a third proposition is to simply create underwater gas stations for a whole fleet of drones, known as Mission Unlimited Unmanned Underwater Vehicle Stations. These refueling stations for underwater drones would be spread across the ocean. They would generate power by deploying a thermal energy pod, which generates electricity by harnessing the energy produced by the mixing of warm and cooler currents underwater. Permanently anchored to the seafloor, the Navy would dispense dozens or even hundreds of these refueling stations where its fleet of unmanned drones could regularly return to top off their batteries. A major obstacle for the deployment of the Manta Ray and similar drones is the challenge of long-range communications with any submerged vehicle.
I think that last energy idea that they had there was probably the least likely, because it kind of takes
Mini
away
gas stations.
Yeah, because it kind of takes away from, I think, the idea that they're trying to utilize with this, which is, being able to go anywhere,
Low
anytime,
maintenance.
low maintenance. And because I think the idea, obviously, of just being able to fly a plane and then drop this thing into the ocean and just have it go, you could obviously do that in such a stealth manner. And, the counter to that is your enemies can just search out where these gas stations
Yeah,
are.
and like take them out if there's one there. or
Yeah,
whatever.
exactly. Or, just put reconnaissance around those areas and pick up whatever comes by
Yeah.
and then follow it and tag it, right?
Yeah, I thought the first one was pretty cool because I didn't even know that they were already generating energy from using the ocean's waves.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. I had no idea that that existed.
Yeah, I hadn't heard much about that either. But just a quick, note I was thinking about when we were watching this, it's just the importance of AI in general, that like we've gone into this rabbit hole now where you have to constantly evolve your AI, because as we're seeing, basically the next war is going to be fought with who has the best AI, right? And the more technology growth that you get from that, it'll translate to better weaponry, more capabilities, less reliance on humans in that instance, probably meaning that if your AI is really, really good, their calculations should be, better than what a human can do, and your reaction time and all that kind of stuff. But then even in addition to that, this is military prospects here that we're talking about, but even space travel is another thing, right? If you have the AI utilization in these tools and in these weapons and these vehicles, can also be utilized when you take that into moving into outer space, right? If you can come up with these ideas and utilize some of this technology to travel to different planets, that's another way that AI is going to be super, super important. And whether China, US, Russia, whatever, they're all investing in these technologies. So
Yeah.
it's a race, and it's like, I hope it doesn't turn out the same way, but it's kind of like a race towards, the first nuclear weapon to some degree. It's like when, the US reached that point first, everybody realized, oh, they're the superpower of the world because they have this thing. So when, we get to this point where we get exponential AI growth, and we get, down the road, and it's like this AI is just so far beyond what everybody else has and it's capable of. And, it's probably not going to be an open source. I imagine it's going to be, a technology that's the country is going to keep to themselves. I don't think we're anywhere near that right now, but I just feel like it's inevitable that we're going to get to this point where AI is just so powerful that it becomes a weapon, whether we want it to or not.
Yeah, for sure, especially depending on who's going to be the people in charge of it. So,
Yeah. Anyways, that's my rant about AI.
Similar drones is the challenge of long-range communications with any submerged vehicle. Due to the conductivity of water, radio waves cannot travel very far below the waves, which is why American submarines utilize very low-frequency communication systems that link up with 5 different antenna complexes the U.S. has built around the world. Manta Ray could be equipped with a VLF antenna as well, but that still limits its ability to communicate, given the very low bandwidth associated with those types of communications. This is why autonomy is a key requirement. The Manta Ray simply cannot receive detailed instructions while deployed deep underwater, and forget about direct control in the same style as the U.S. Air Force's drone operators. One solution is to equip the Manta Ray with a deployable antenna that can rise up to the surface and connect to orbiting satellites. Many submarines currently utilize such a system for high-bandwidth communications, though it comes with significant risk. Northrop Grumman, however, has developed what it calls expendable data bubbles, which the Manta Ray could expel from its body. These devices would then float to the surface and, upon breaching the waves, transmit information gathered by the drone. However, this communication would go strictly one way, making artificial intelligence the key to the entire concept working. With both Russia and China fielding new submarines, the need for a dramatic expansion in anti-submarine warfare is pressing, and the Manta Ray, along with a whole family of similar drones, could be the answer. These autonomous drones, autonomous even to the point of generating their own power, could be the edge that the US Navy needs to continue to deter any bad actor from starting an unfortunate war that would end up costing the entire world dearly. However, if such a war does kick off, America's underwater Skynet Terminators will soon be ready. Now go check out the truth about drone warfare in Ukraine, or click this other video instead.
So that was our introduction to underwater unmanned vehicles, U.S. Manta Ray Submarine.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, I feel like part of me thinks it's really cool that they have this like technology that's capable of doing these things because it's, slightly mind blowing. But the other side of it, it's like really scary that I'm like, we're at this point in the world where like, the US military wants to use a completely autonomous robot in warfare. Like, I'm like, that's literally like, in my mind, I'm thinking like we're living in Jetsons world. Like,
well, like they just said there, like Terminator, right?
Yeah.
It's literally that. Like we are. I just remember.
I love how they say Terminator, and I'm like thinking of like cartoon Jetsons.
I would prefer the Jetsons version for sure. But it's just crazy, right? Because we were, 25 years ago when the internet was becoming popular and, YouTube was coming to be. Never would you think that we would have had this exponential technological growth.
Yeah.
To think that Terminator could become a reality. I remember just like watching the movies, any movie really, whether it's iRobot or anything like that, and thinking to myself, oh, we're like so far away from that. Like maybe it'll come about when I'm in my lifetime, but like when I'm like, near dying. And it's like, no, like within 5 years, I mean, the predictions of what AI are going to do is pretty insane. But at the same time, like we just said at the beginning, we've experienced ourselves with the flaws that AI has. So maybe we're kind of jumping the gun here of what the capabilities are. And, like you were saying, the fact that they want to have an unmanned submarine and they're trying to put together all these, different technologies. They were just saying that the other company in 2023 hadn't came up with anything other than a prototype that they were testing, and that was 2 years ago. So, sometimes this technology, although it sounds like it's going to be great on paper, it doesn't go as smoothly as they would like. Yeah. And there's so many nuances.
Well, we learned
here.
about some of that too, right? When we've done some of the Fat Electricians videos where he's talked about, guns or what was it, like a grenade launcher, like all these ideas that seemed like they were these great ideas, and then in reality they weren't very practical at all.
Yeah, and hopefully a hot war doesn't come about, because then that also really drives the industrialization of the weaponry to move faster, right? Because I think, hopefully all of these things act as a deterrence more than anything else. It's just like maybe we get to the point where we have such advanced weaponry without getting into a hot war that everybody's just like, what's the point? Because, it's just going to be a giant...
going to blow each other up.
Well, yeah, but it's also just going to be a shit show in that, like, it's almost impossible to win, right? Like that's a similarity to nuclear war, right? Why nobody wants it, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose scenario. So if you start to realize, well, they have a bunch of unmanned vehicles, we have a bunch of unmanned vehicles, it's just going to be a bunch of robots fighting each other across the world. Like what's the point at that? You know what I mean? Anyways, that was why China is terrified. Clearly Sam is terrified, and I'm intrigued. So you guys can give us your insights down below by hitting the comment section. Found it interesting nonetheless, because I had never heard about an unmanned vehicle underwater before.
No, me either.
As is the case often on our channel, we've learned something today, and we love learning. So give us a recommendation down below. Have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching, guys.